And that's what's great about Beth's place is it's worth, for one, our community has a responsibility for these kids. They may not personally be my kids, but as a community, we have a responsibility for the future, and these kids are the future. And so investing in them is just going to help our society and Longview, Kelso, Cowlitz County in the next 10 years.
You're right. Chelsea Allison, welcome. And so I'm really glad that we're getting this chance to sit down today and talk. You're actually a flash from the past from my standpoint, because you had a relationship with one of my kids, which is delightful. That
Katie, 07.
And you remind me somewhat like her, because she's like the total overachiever. She's doing so much more than I ever thought she would do, or she ever thought she would do. And you're kind of in that same spot. So let's talk a little bit about how you got here. Describe to me the Chelsea that was in college.
Sure. Yeah. I think pretty similar to who I am now, just, more young and more naive, but I was definitely a go-getter. I wanted to participate in everything and try everything and figure out, where I fit in the world. And I think I'm still a little like that to this day. But in college, you don't even know who you are yet, and so you're just trying to get through, classes and graduate. But, I was
very aware that everyone around you has their opinion of who you are.
Yeah. I'm self-aware. Yeah. But, and people, I'm often told, positive Polly, or, just, I have a big personality.
I could see that.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about was the fact that I always wonder what people think, first impressions. And first impressions of you, I would think that people look at you and think, who is this woman who is so full of energy and and positivity and hope? And that's what I hope they get to see a little bit of that side of who you are here today, because it takes a while to learn that from people. Yeah. Although I have a feeling that I could sit down with you, and in 10 minutes you could tell me the big picture.
Yeah.
Pretty easily.
I'm a pretty open book. But yeah, I think that's, people's first impression of me. And some people, it's too much. Some people it's like, she's a little too much, not my cup of tea, but that's all right. I've learned to accept that, and I'm still going to continue to be who I am. And, it doesn't mean that we can't, adjust ourselves a little bit based on our audience and things like that. But for the most part, life is exciting. There's different opportunities every day. And I think that it's just exciting to take grasps of them, you know, and keep a positive outlook on things as much as possible.
And you've had your share of trauma.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Talk a little bit about that and what you had an experience with cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was late 2019, August 2019. I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. And actually a month before that, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh my gosh.
So in the same month, and we don't really have cancer in our family. I mean, we have other things, but not cancer. We were very fortunate in that sense. So when my mom was diagnosed and when I was diagnosed, it was definitely a very foreign thing for us. Mm-hmm. And we just basically, I started January 2020 with chemo and radiation. I had a 24-hour chemo pump fanny pack that I wore. And I did 6 weeks of radiation every day, driving back and forth to Portland.
At that time, you were working for Fred Meyer in marketing? Once I was diagnosed, I had taken a leave of absence, but I was with Fred Meyer, but I was on a leave for 13 months. And I did 6 weeks of, chemo and radiation. And then I had
massive surgery in January 2020, where they, removed the tumor, and I had a temporary ileostomy put in, and then I started about 8 months worth of chemo, about 30 days after surgery. And I started chemo. I mean, it was February, March 2020. And it was like
there was something else going on at that time, wasn't there?
It was like the same week that the world just shut down, because I wasn't lucky enough to get colon cancer at 30. I had to get it during a global pandemic as well. So that was pretty wild. And, I dropped 100 pounds in a month, and ended up having a rare deficiency that made the chemo much stronger effect. But I did get through it. And, I don't think I would be here if I got to credit my mom as well.
Yeah.
We have an awesome family. My husband is so supportive. He took care of me. Our whole family did. I mean, and when I say family, I also mean our community.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the week that I started my first round of chemo, we had like months worth of people signed up for meals, dropping off every day at my house. My friends who work for Fred Meyer, because we couldn't go to the store because COVID, and we didn't really know what it was yet. So we couldn't even pretend to touch anybody in public or be in public at all.
How strange.
I was like,
you must have felt terribly isolated.
Oh, we were just locked away and staring at the same walls every day for months and months. And, but my friends at Fred Meyer would be dropping off cleaning supplies on my front porch. We had, the hookup with toilet paper in 2020.
Fred Meyer. Yeah.
When it would first come in, they would always put a case aside for me and drop it off on my front porch. When I was running out of disability after 6 months, my part-time employees, my hourly employees donated 500 hours to me so I could finish treatment. Cool. And so when I say family, I also mean like our community as well. But my mom, she was also going through breast cancer, and she is the toughest woman I have ever met. So she had a mastectomy, and a week later was driving me back and forth to radiation. Wow. I mean, she was like, just cut it out. I'm done. I got a kid to take care of, she was late 60s at the time.
So crazy that both of you went through it together.
Yeah. And
what a bonding thing, too. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't think my mom and I could get any closer. She's my best friend in the whole world, but we did, you know. And, I have four older siblings. They were all in high school when I was born. So my sisters and my brother, they were all right by my side. And my husband's family, my husband's grandmother, Rosie, she was, in her 80s coming and cleaning my house weekly. So I guess when I say family, I just also mean our whole community.
Yeah. What great support, though.
Really show up in times of need. So, yeah.
So you got through that, and you're ready to go back to work.
Yeah. I went back to work September of 2020. And so I was out for about 13 months, and I went to work 6 weeks after my last surgery. And it was wild, because not only was I going back to work with a new body and a new, you're a whole new person.
Yeah. I don't think people get that either, time. Chelsea. That's a very different thing. Unless you've experienced it, you really can't.
No. And it's not really, when it comes to cancer, or really any disease that you go through, you don't really talk about like the after portion. It's all about, getting through it, which when you're in the middle of it, in the thick of it, you're all positivity, because I will say positivity is a form of survival. Yeah. Really. Yeah. And you're just getting through it. And so when you come out the other side, you are a completely different person, but you don't even realize it yet. You have a new body, you have a new personality, you have a new, for me, I had a whole new relationship with God and my faith. And so, you try going back to a life that was before all this, but you're a totally different person.
Yeah.
And,
Did people comment about that too? You seem so different.
No, I think, well, people would comment mostly about how I handled going through it.
Yeah.
One of my friends was like, you're like the poster child for cancer, and I was like, well, I don't know if I want that title.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like, positivity really is survival when you're going through those things, but also like you're human too. And so there were times, absolutely, I was down on my hands and knees, terrified, praying, that I would survive. Like, it's not all, sunshine and rainbows.
Right. But having that kind of relationship with God that you could lean on in that way, discovering that going through something as traumatic as that, it is life-changing.
Yeah.
Because it's not about going to church then.
No. And I hadn't really, I was very fortunate growing up. I had a wonderful family, did school, did sports, all the choir, singing, social activities. Like, I was very fortunate growing up, and I hadn't really had a super traumatic experience ever to have any kind of testimony. And so when I was diagnosed, that first week when you're first diagnosed and you haven't spoken to the doctor yet, you don't know the game plan. You just know you have this thing, but you don't know anything else.
Yeah.
That's the scariest part. And that's when I really just clung and really, even in a sense, kind of came back to Jesus. He was always there in my life. I was raised in the church, but that's where I really came to Jesus, because there was no other option.
Yeah.
And once I had that first meeting with my surgeon and my care team, I didn't question whether I was going to survive or not. I knew I was going to make it, because I just had this really strong feeling that the Lord wasn't done with me yet here. But I just didn't know what that was,
Yeah.
why are you keeping me around? So then I went back to work, and I knew it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I made a career change.
Let's talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like all this was preparing you for where you're at. I know at any point in your life, you can kind of feel like everything leads to this, but it really did.
Yeah.
This is where you shifting from working for a corporation to working for a local nonprofit is a big deal. So now what do you do?
So now I work for Community House on Broadway, and Core Health is our sister organization. But I'm the community outreach coordinator, which I think is just it's kind of my dream job.
Yeah, it is.
And I had quit Fred Meyer. I'd put in my 2 weeks. I didn't really have a plan. All I knew was that I had God in the back of my head every single day telling me, like, you're not meant to be here. You're not meant to be here. And so I had to figure something out. So I just put in my 2 weeks, not really with a plan other than trusting the Lord, and 2 months later, I was in Frank Morrison's office and hired on as community coordinator. And oh, by the way, we have this new youth shelter going under construction that we're going to need to, bring the community in for. And it was just really good timing for that. And
I can just see Frank.
Yeah.
Like offering you a job in 5 minutes and telling you, can you do anything you want to do? We just need you around here.
Yeah. Well, they had community coordinators in the past.
Yeah.
But it was kind of fun because I got to work with Frank and others in the organization to really kind of develop this role because, they had volunteer coordinators and community coordinators in the past, but, we kind of needed to up the game, up the level a little bit.
With Best Place starting.
Yeah, with community involvement and funding and volunteering and really just awareness. So that was my goal going in.
Perfect.
I was born and raised in Longview my whole life. Everybody, I feel, they know what Community House is, but I didn't know how vast and how huge of a population community house helps. And so that was kind of my goal, was to educate our citizens and even our longtime citizens, how much of our community house on Broadway really helps.
Yeah.
And all we have going on. So, yeah.
So when you came into this role, what did you want to see happen? Like, is it Frank's vision, the vision of community house that you wanted to get behind and make happen, or is it something bigger than that?
Well, I didn't have a social work background.
Yeah.
I came from sales for 17 years, and retail. And so when I first came in the role, it was really just learning the nonprofit industry.
Yeah.
Taking Frank's lead and his vision and learning everything I can that I'm still am learning. And then also being able to, provide maybe my own insight or my own suggestions on how we can get people involved more. But
when Beth's Place was getting, you can describe a little bit about what Beth's Place is, because they were in the process of building that and having somebody with enthusiasm and a willingness to kind of get in there and do all the work was exactly what it would take, because, there's only one Frank. And so he does his stuff really well, and he does what he does at a really high level, but he can't do all of it. No. And having you come alongside him to help launch Beth's Place was huge, I think.
Yeah. And, we just yes, I like to think that I'm, a big piece of that, but we have a great team.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not just me.
No.
We have a great team of people, and Frank is so good about meeting somebody and being very quick to identify that person's gifts and how they can be useful to our mission and getting them on board. And so we just have this incredible team of people who all have their own strengths, who are all subject matter experts in their, in what they're strong at. And when we come together, it's like, we can make magic happen. Yeah. But really it's, Frank's ability to be able to see, the possibilities in people and bringing them aboard.
Well, explain the magic of Beth's Place.
Yeah. So Beth's Place, community house on Broadway, was started in 1988. Everybody knows the original building. It houses up to 120 people. And then Beth's Place is for 48, will house up to 48 13 to 17-year-olds who are unaccompanied in the community. So unaccompanied means, there could be kids out there, yes, who are in foster care, who there's not enough foster families for. And then, there are kids out there, though, that do have guardians in place, that do have parents in place, but parents may be in active addiction, or they're, they maybe there's abuse going on at home, or maybe the parents are doing everything they can, but just don't know what to do anymore.
Right.
And so that's what Beth's Place is. It's for a safe space for kids who are out there couch surfing or jumping from place to place, who are homeless or for some reason don't want to or can't go home. Maybe home's not safe. Beth's Place is that safe place where teens can come. And it's not just a shelter, though. It's not just, it's a beautiful shelter. We have beautiful dormitories, rooms, but it's also, we're a holistic approach to care. So there's an employment training center, education center, mental health services. There's a full-size kitchen and culinary program where Kristen Cole, she's teaching the kids how to cook.
And we're going to talk to her soon.
Yeah. And eventually, we'll teach the kids not only to cook for themselves, but to cook ready-to-eat food. So that can be their first experience with employment. Yeah. We put in full classrooms to have volunteers and people come in to help get kids graduated and through school. We put in IT labs for industry professionals to come in and, teach tech skills and software programming because that's where the industry is going
Yep.
and is. So Beth's Place, it's not just a shelter. It's really getting these kids into a safe space and then getting them out of survival mode so that they can learn what they like, what they're good at, what their future might be. We also have a whole mental health clinical side with Core Health. And it's right there in the shelter. So kids are receiving mental health services. They get peer counselors. If kids are going, if they've been dealing with chemical dependency, because the average age that kids start using now is 11 years old. So a large majority of these teens have already been experiencing substance abuse. And 80% of adults who come into community house come from a home of substance use. So it's definitely a generational problem. So a lot of the kids coming into Beth's Place more than likely have came from a home of substance dependency. So, we offer what's called SUD, a substance dependency group for teens to participate in so that we can make mental health and sobriety the priority.
Right.
And then once they're in a good place, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, they're sober, that's when we can start exploring, okay, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Right.
And then what are the steps we can take to start, ensuring that once you're 18 and older, that they'll eventually become a successful contributing member of society.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about Beth's Place is it's worth, for one, our community has a responsibility for these kids. They may not personally be my kids, but as a community, we have a responsibility for the future, and these kids are the future. And so investing in them is just going to help our society and Longview, Cowlitz County in the next 10 years.
You're right.
Because if we don't do something now, it's clear we already have a big homeless and addiction problem in Cowlitz County. But if we don't do something now, it's going to be twice as bad in the next 10 years.
Well, I think even taking a step back, Chelsea, and obviously I've been around this for the last 35 years, pastoring right next door.
Yeah.
In a church that butts up with Community House. One of the things I realized pretty quickly was that nobody knows as much about the homeless community as your organization because you're keyed into it.
Right.
But I didn't realize at first how unique the situation was here in our city, because I think sometimes people think that we have a way of dealing with homelessness, but that's not the way your approach, and it never has been. But you've always, I think one of the things I've heard from Frank is that over the years, there was a missing piece, and that was the kids, because at the time, there were very few homeless shelters who took in families, especially children, for whatever reason, probably just because it's such a huge undertaking. And they saw that whole time. We really need to do something about that. But making the leap and actually doing something takes something like Beth's Place, right?
Yep.
And so you have to go in to the deep end of the pool.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how many, I'm sure you have been a part of this for years and seen it for years. The amount of conversations that, groups are city leaders are having, groups are having, churches are having about what to do about, the homelessness. And, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? At some point, you got to stop talking about it and you just got to do it. And I think that that's what, Frank is, he's so brave in a sense, in that he just did it, you know? Of course, there's a lot of, red tape, and there's a lot of operations and logistics that go into play. But how long are we going to talk about doing something? Eventually, you just got to kind of jump in with both feet. And
for him, a huge motivator in that was the death of his daughter. And it's like, it was kind of, I remember talking to him about this and he kind of said, it's like we can't not do anything about this anymore. We have to do something. And Mariah's passing, which is part of wasn't her middle name Beth, right?
Her middle name's Beth, yeah.
Yeah, Mariah's passing was a huge motivator for things to actually get off the ground and start moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and also, before Mariah's passing, also his experience, him and his wife, with adopting 5 kids.
Yeah.
They had 3 of their own daughters. And then, God bless them. Then they ended up adopting 5 more siblings. And I think that experience, we were talking about how experiences shape us and what we do. When Frank came aboard in 2012, he had that experience from adopting 5 children with a mother who had chemical dependency, kids who had a lot of trauma at a young age. He has seen what kids are born into and what mental health, issues kids have when they're coming out of a situation like that.
Right.
And just our lack of resources that we had.
Because you could never do enough.
Right.
You're always behind.
And so, imagine, a person who's seeing homelessness currently, that person more than likely was probably born into that situation with a lot of mental health, issues that were never addressed at a childhood age and just spent a lifetime eventually self-medicating, self-coping. And then over decades, you do get to a point where it's very hard to reverse that.
Yeah.
But Frank's experience, adopting children, having a lack of resources, when he came into community house, and it was just the one building at the time, and we had staff, but somebody would be going through a mental crisis in the building and we couldn't get anybody to come out.
Right.
And, all of their mental health services were third party, which is very expensive. And so that's when he had the idea to bring in mental health services because from his experience with his own adopted children, he knew that that's where we needed to start with people with mental health. And
that's what the data shows too.
Right.
The huge majority of people that are in a homeless situation, especially in homeless care like you guys do, deal with either one or both. And you can't ignore it.
Right.
It's not fair to bring them in.
Right.
And then just send them back out into the same thing that they came from. Yeah.
Wet housing is what it's called.
Yeah.
Is where, and there are some organizations out there like that where, they'll bring people in, put them in detox for, a couple weeks, give them, put them through housing services and employment services, which is great. Yeah. But if you don't fix the root problem, they're going to lose it all within a month and then you're back to square one. And Frank knew that. And so, in 2012, he was donated a building by a group of doctors on 14th.
I used to work for those doctors.
Yeah. And then, he met a mental health clinician who actually was the clinician of the mother of the kids he adopted. And he said, I need your help. I want to deal with this mental health, situation that we have going on. And we need more resources for community house. And so he worked with, these clinicians and over the course of a year, got all the licensing and put together
which is huge to do.
Yeah. Put together by 2014, is when Core Health was born. And so Core Health was created. It's a completely separate nonprofit, but Core Health was created to be a resource for the people seeking services at community house. So that community house wouldn't just be a bed and a shelter, that, we would actually be helping these people to have sustainment in, their sobriety and eventually leave community house and not have to come back.
Yeah. Well, it seems like from my perspective on the outside, it looks like it's like you've upped your game. When Core Health came on, you upped your game as far as mental health. When the youth center came on, you upped your game as far as having some kind of outreach to youth.
Yeah.
Now with Beth's place, you're upping your game again. And it seems like each one of these kind of like promotions has caused the whole organization to up its game. Like, it isn't like you left the community house on Broadway behind, but everything is kind of like, in a generational way, become better and better and better. And Best Place seems to be taken up to a whole nother level.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's because, you integrate mental health services and you see the results from that. And you see, people coming in broken and not clean, not sober, decades worth of mental health trauma. We see a lot of single moms coming in and with multiple children. And that if you don't do something about it, those kids are eventually maybe walking through our doors too. But, you see the results from applying mental health and sobriety. And, the success rate grows and grows. And then, you add in the youth center, Ascent, and you hire youth clinicians who are specific, to treating youth. And then you're out in the schools. And so you just continue to see these positive results happening. And you just want to keep going. You know?
I think it's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you're in the community. I'm glad you stayed in the community. Thanks. So many young people can't wait to till they get out of here. And I really think that at some point, my dream for Longview Kelso is that this become a destination instead of something we're fleeing from, that there's a reason to stay here.
Yeah.
And Chelsea, what you're doing is you're painting a picture of a reason to stay, which is really good.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited about what could be in the future for you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I know that you are too. What's one thing that you really hope happens in the next couple of years through the things that you're working on?
I hope through the next couple years that, well, one, we get Beth's place completely funded. That's a big deal. And that we get Beth's place to, full capacity, which is 48 kids. Yeah. And that we just then have a sustainment of success stories coming out of there. That's what we want to see, is kids coming out of there. Like, I didn't get to choose the environment or the world that I was born into, but I get to choose now who I'm going to be and what I'm going to do. And I want in 10 years for people to look at Cowlitz County and go, how did they do it?
Yeah. I
mean, look at the rates, look at our homeless and addiction rates and 10 years ago and look at them now and how did they do it, and it's all God leading us. It's, we're just following his outline and his leadership,
and not settling for the minimum of what you can do for people, but having a hope and a dream for them for something significantly more than they can do right now.
Yeah. And, I also, hope that my hope would be is that, our community can come together and realize that it's not us versus them. People are struggling and it's not an us versus them thing. We are all one community. And when you have empathy and you have understanding and you realize like a lot of these people weren't given the choice.
Yeah.
A lot of them were born into these situations and once again, didn't have the resources, how to handle them or really given a chance. And so, my goal and my wish is for our community to come together.
Yeah.
And to have pride in Cowlitz County and say, you know what, we're going to take care of our citizens. We're going to come together. We're going to hold people accountable, but we're also going to have empathy and compassion, and we're going to do it the right way.
Yeah.
And we're going to, let's start with our kids, whether it's small business owners or churches or schools or, there's so many amazing people out there with all different kinds of resources and talents and gifts that if we all came together collectively and made this a priority, I don't see us having a homeless problem, in the next 10 years. But so that's the goal.
If you are a pastor in this town, because I have kind of an affinity towards pastors, invite Chelsea to come. Invite her to come to your church and tell her what's going on in our own community. I mean, I think a lot of people they know about Community House on Broadway. They may not have heard much about Beth's place, but how do they get hold of you? How do they get you to come and share that story with them, with their congregation?
You can email me. So my email is Chelsea, so CHELSEAA, so Chelsea A at CHOBLV.org.
We'll put that in the notes too.
Okay. Or they can call me, which is 360-560-1694. That's my work cell phone.
Yeah.
And check out our website. Just Google Community House on Broadway. And we have a beautiful website on there. We have great success stories. And we also have our Breaking Bread benefit dinner coming up May 3rd. It's a Saturday this year, May 3rd at 5 o'clock at the Longview Event Center. You can sponsor a table. It's $400 to sponsor a table of 8. And that's a really great starting point to come. You're going to hear testimonies. You're going to hear all about the organization. It's going to be a fun night with live auction and silent auction, dessert dash. So that's a really great, way to get involved as well. But also reach out to me. I'm more than happy. I love going to churches and talking about what we're doing or social clubs or businesses, whatever it may be. Any opportunity I get to talk about what we're doing in the community, I'm game. I love it. So
well, thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah.
It's been great to talk to you today, and I'm really excited about what the future holds for our community and to the work that you're doing. Thank you.